Ever wondered how those stunning stained glass windows in cathedrals were made? Can you imagine crafting delicate glass vessels without modern technology? Did you know medieval glassmakers kept their techniques secret for centuries? Number 5. The mysterious world of medieval glassmaking. Glass was practically magic in medieval times. Seriously, imagine living in a world where most people used wooden cups and metal plates. Then suddenly, someone shows up with this incredible transparent material that catches the light and transforms it into colors. Medieval glassmakers were part artist, part scientist, and part magician in the eyes of common folk. These craftsmen worked in sweltering workshops, facing temperatures hot enough to melt sand into liquid. Their tools were simple iron blowpipes, wooden paddles, and metal shears. Yet from these basic implements came works of stunning beauty that have survived nearly 1,000 years. The skills weren't taught in books or schools. Glassmaking knowledge passed from master to apprentice in closely guarded traditions. Young apprentices would spend years just preparing materials before they were allowed to handle molten glass. The secrets of colored glass recipes were especially protected. Some formulas were known to only a handful of artisans in all of Europe. With their faces glowing in the light of furnaces, medieval glassmakers transformed ordinary materials into extraordinary treasures. Their creations decorated the greatest cathedrals and adorned the tables of kings and nobles. Not bad for craftsmen using technology that hadn't fundamentally changed since Roman times. Number 4. From sand to splendor, the basic process. Making glass in medieval times started with gathering the right ingredients. The main component, plain old sand. But not just any sand would do. Glassmakers needed silica-rich sand without too many impurities. They mixed this sand with plant ash or mineral soda ash, which lowered the melting temperature. The mixture went into clay pots inside a furnace that reached about 2,700 degrees Fahrenheit. Imagine that heat with no temperature controls except the glassmaker's experienced eye. After melting for hours, the mixture became a glowing, honey-like substance ready for shaping. For blown glass vessels, the process was mesmerizing. A glassmaker would gather a blob of molten glass on the end of a hollow metal blowpipe. With skilled puffs of breath through the pipe, the glass bubble expanded. The artisan constantly rotated the pipe to keep the shape even. Using simple tools like wooden blocks and metal pincers, they shaped the hot glass into bottles, cups, and flasks. Window glass required different techniques. For the simplest kind, crown glass, a glassmaker would blow a large bubble, transfer it to a metal rod called a pontil, and spin it rapidly. The centrifugal force caused the bubble to flatten into a disc up to 4 feet wide. After cooling, this disc could be cut into smaller pieces for windows. What's truly impressive is that medieval glassmakers achieved all this with none of our modern conveniences. No thermometers. No safety equipment. Just skill passed down through generations and refined through years of practice near scorching furnaces. Number 3. Adding color and detail, the art of medieval glass. Ever seen those vibrant blues and reds in cathedral windows? Medieval glassmakers were color wizards. Adding metal oxides to the glass mixture created those spectacular hues. Copper oxide made greens and blues, cobalt oxide created deep blues, gold produced ruby reds, and manganese gave purple tones. Creating colored glass was expensive and technically challenging. The ruby red glass was so difficult to make that it often came in thin layers fused to clear glass, rather than being colored all the way through. This technique, called flashing, allowed glassmakers to stretch precious colorants further. Stained glass windows weren't just colored glass pieces, though. Artists painted details like faces, hands, and clothing onto the glass using a special paint made of finely ground glass mixed with iron oxide and wine or urine as a binding agent. This paint was applied with brushes made from animal hair. After painting, the glass pieces were reheated just enough to fuse the paint permanently to the surface without melting the glass itself. Joining glass pieces together required lead. Craftsmen melted and cast lead into H-shaped strips called cames. The glass pieces fit into these flexible lead channels, and the entire window was assembled like a puzzle. Remaining gaps were sealed with putty made from chalk and linseed oil. This technique was so effective that some medieval windows have survived 800+ years of weather, wars, and pollution. For decorative vessels, glassmakers applied thin threads of molten glass in contrasting colors. They used metal tools to create patterns like zigzags, spirals, and complex netting designs. Some particularly skilled artisans could even create glass vessels with multiple layers of different colors, then carve through the outer layers to reveal the colors beneath, a technique remarkably similar to modern cameo glass. Number 2, the workshop and tools, behind the scenes. Medieval glass workshops were hot, dangerous places. Imagine working daily near furnaces reaching over 2,000 degrees. The main furnace, called the Great Furnace, typically had multiple openings for different stages of glassmaking. One area melted the raw materials, another kept finished glass warm for working, and a third allowed glass to cool slowly. These workshops needed constant fuel. A busy glass workshop could consume an entire forest over its lifetime. This massive fuel consumption led many glass workshops to relocate to heavily forested areas. Some regions even passed laws limiting glass production to protect their valuable timber resources. The tools were surprisingly simple. Blowpipes, hollow metal tubes about 4 feet long, were the primary tool. Pontil rods, solid metal rods, held the glass while artisans worked on the part that had been attached to the blowpipe. Wooden blocks shaped like cups, often soaked in water to prevent burning, helped form the glass. Shears and pincers manipulated the hot material. Marvers, flat surfaces originally made of marble but later often iron, provided a smooth surface for rolling and shaping the glass. Glassmaking was typically a team effort. The master glassmaker directed the work and performed the most skilled tasks. Assistants gathered glass from the furnace, maintained proper temperatures, and helped with simpler aspects of vessels or windows. Apprentices spent years learning each stage of the craft, starting with menial tasks like keeping the furnace fueled and preparing materials. The hierarchy in workshops was strict. Guild regulations in many places restricted who could become a master glassmaker. In some regions, glassmaking was considered so valuable that artisans received special privileges. Venetian glassmakers, for example, enjoyed noble status but faced death penalties if they revealed trade secrets or left Venice to work elsewhere. Number 1, regional styles and famous examples. Venice dominated medieval glassmaking by the late Middle Ages. Their cristallo glass, nearly colorless and incredibly clear, was the iPhones of medieval craftsmanship. Everyone wanted it, few could afford it, and other regions tried desperately to copy it. The secret: super pure materials and revolutionary furnace designs. Venetian glassmakers created delicate vessels with impossibly thin walls, sometimes decorated with colorful twisted canes or gold leaf. Their skill was so prized that the glassmaking community was relocated to Murano Island in the 1200s, partly to prevent workshop fires in the crowded city, but also to better control their valuable secrets. German glassmakers specialized in a different style called Waldglas or forest glass. This glass had a distinctive greenish tint from iron impurities in the sand and was used for drinking vessels called Krautstrunk, cabbage stalk, due to their bumpy decorative surfaces. These practical, robust glasses served in taverns and homes throughout Central Europe. Islamic glassmakers influenced European techniques significantly. Their expertise in enameling, painting glass with colored glass powders and refining to fuse them eventually made its way to Venice. The famous Luck of Edenhall, a 13th-century Syrian enameled beaker that survived in England until the 1900s, shows the quality of Middle Eastern glass that Europeans admired and imitated. In stained glass, nothing surpasses the windows of great Gothic cathedrals. The blue glass in Chartres Cathedral in France remains unmatched in its intensity. Created in the early 13th century, these windows used a cobalt colorant formula that modern science still can't perfectly replicate. The 15th century windows of King's College Chapel in Cambridge feature glass so thin that the details were painted with single hair brushes. What's remarkable is how these regional styles developed with limited communication between glassmaking centers. Techniques spread slowly through traveling artisans or rare examples of traded glass. Each region developed distinctive approaches to solve the same basic challenges of turning sand into functional art. Did you realize those gleaming medieval treasures were crafted using such primitive tools? How many secrets of medieval glassmakers might still remain undiscovered today? What would those ancient artisans think if they could see how we've built upon their hard-won knowledge to create the glass technology that surrounds us every day?